You don't necessarily need to understand what the best shape is for every activity. If you know what a good posture looks and feels like, then you can make a very clear and concise decision every single time for yourself to optimize your posture in that moment. G'day and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, I want to show you how you can find your perfect sitting posture in any chair or at any desk. This is a really important conversation for a number of reasons. The main one potentially is the fact that the day-to-day shapes that you put your spine into can have some very important consequences for an overwhelming majority of musculoskeletal complaints. So whether you suffer from headaches, neck pain, shoulder pain, upper back pain, even elbow pain and RSI, low back pain, pelvic pain, sacroiliac joint pain, hip pain, and even knee pain, foot and ankle pain, there can be some very hidden covert connections between the quality of your day-to-day spinal shapes, the accruing of spinal dysfunction, and a flow-on effect that ends up causing some problems elsewhere. So if you're anyone who suffers from any form of musculoskeletal dysfunction, an ache, pain, or an injury, it's absolutely vital that you have a clear understanding about how to sit correctly in any environment so that you can make sure that you decrease the risk of this sort of stuff being perpetuated going forwards. So one of the most important things that I find about this conversation is that you don't need to be an expert in ergonomics in terms of chairs or desk setups. All you need to understand is what your best posture feels like, and then apply that to every situation that you find yourself in. You don't necessarily need to understand what the best shape is for every activity. If you know what a good posture looks and feels like, then you can make a very clear and concise decision every single time for yourself to optimize your posture in that moment. So the best place to start is to show you how to find your best sitting posture. And the interesting thing about this is that we can start by standing up. I find a lot of people find it much easier to get into a better posture when standing because it is a more natural shape to be in. It's a little bit harder to do that when you're sitting. Now, in order to find your best sitting posture, the first thing I want to get you to do is stand with your feet straight. Then by squeezing your butt cheeks, what this will do is this will reorientate your pelvis into a better position. So if you're someone who tends to be a little bit anteriorly tilted through your pelvis, maybe you've got an increased lordosis through your lower back, by squeezing your glutes, that will reorientate your pelvis into a better position and allow us to sit in a better shape by optimizing the way we load up that low back and pelvic area. And from this position, we want to make sure that you draw your belly in a little bit just to help hold that shape a little bit more. Then moving up towards your chest and shoulders, we don't want you to poke your chest out. We want to make sure that your rib cage is down in a healthy way without being rounded over. So a great way to find this good position, and it ties into a good head and neck position, is imagine that someone's grabbing you by the hair and pulling you up into a really nice shape. And what this does is that instead of trying to self-correct individual areas, by dragging yourself up, it tends to pull everything up into a better shape. So your chest will be in a good position, your head and neck will be in a good position where that chin isn't poking out, but you're also not looking down or looking up in any meaningful way. And then from a shoulder position, there's a common misconception that we need to clear up. Now, the best shoulder posture for you to be in is not back and down like it tends to be for so many people. In actual fact, the best shoulder position when you're trying to reclaim good posture, in theory, is back and up a little bit. And up enough just to feel like you're taking the weight of your shoulders. We don't want them to be up around your ears. But the idea with this is when we tend to slouch, the way that the body's designed and the way that gravity acts on our body is that slouching causes us to drop our shoulders and roll forwards. So in theory, the way to reclaim a good posture is to do the opposite. So in theory, we should be going back and up a fraction, again, to support the weight and not being up around our ears. Because if you're already slouching and you go back, which is good, but then you go down further, you're really creating increased tension again through those structures of your shoulder, upper back, and neck that could lead to sort of exacerbating any of those symptoms as opposed to resolving them. So again, when we're in this good position with our feet straight, butt squeezed, core drawn in, pulled up into a good shape, shoulders back and comfortably up, literally the only thing that should change when you sit down is that your hips and knees bend. Because again, a good posture when you're standing is the same body that you use when you're sitting, so the shape should be the same. The only difference is that as soon as you move towards a desk and those hips and knees are bent, is that you should bend your elbows to 90 degrees to be on the surface that you're on. Once you've found your good posture, and you sit back into your chair as far as you feel you need to go, so your bottom's touching the back, or just before you feel like you need to lift your feet off the ground if you're a little bit shorter. This posture is something that you need to support. So if you know that this is a good position, and then you relax, and you have to relax to find the back of the chair, then all of a sudden you're compromising that posture in some way. So what we need to do here is we need to understand that you've gone from a really nice ideal posture, and even if it's a subtle shift away from that shape, if I try and maintain this shape and then stand back up again, what you'll actually find is that I'm actually standing in this position. So instead of being in that upright position, I've now gravitated to a shape where I'm loading up my tissue in a way that is potentially not designed for over a long period of time. So if you're someone who has developed neck pain or shoulder pain or upper back pain, and you realize that you're in this position all the time as opposed to this position, then just something as simple as being in this shape for a long period of time can be enough to create this chain reaction of events that leads to some dysfunction going forwards. Now, obviously we want to make sure that if you know where your best posture is, we want to fill the gap behind you with something other than your body. So if you have a rolled up towel, a rolled up cushion, a rolled up jumper or a sweater, if you fill the gap that would normally be filled with your back hinging and your shoulders relaxing, then it will allow you to be in this position without having to sit on the edge of the chair and hold yourself in this shape indefinitely. Because obviously there's some endurance involved, there's some strength involved, and some conditioning involved in order to be here for 6 to 8 hours a day. But if you feel like you need to relax, make sure that you're relaxing in a much more supported shape as opposed to a slouchy posture. Now, the other thing to consider is whether your seat has armrests. Now, in a perfect world, again, if you found that nice posture and you just bend your elbows, in theory, your armrests should be at the exact level to support this positional shape. Now, the risk that we run is if your armrests are a little bit lower than that, then obviously what will happen is if you go to relax onto that, then again, we're creating this position where we're dropping down and loading up the neck and upper back in a way that it may not be able to sustain over time, even though this isn't a very threatening shape. And this goes to another level when we start talking about your desk setup. And again, you don't need to go out and buy a fancy desk, but you do need to make sure that you see exactly how your good posture can be implanted into your desk and then have your desk modified to fit that shape as opposed to the other way around. So again, when you've been in a good posture, you bent your elbows to 90 degrees. In a perfect world, this is exactly where your mouse and keyboard should be. When your elbows are at your side, you should be able to reach all the keys that you need to reach. You should be able to reach your mouse with no issues at all. So as soon as you feel like things start to get dragged away from you, so if you end up moving your keyboard and mouse away, and you find that you end up having to reach for those things, then again, over time, there's this constant extra load going through your shoulders, through your neck, and through your upper back that shouldn't be there long term. And it can be one of the foundational reasons why you're having the dysfunction that you are having, or because you're spending more time in shapes that your body isn't designed to be in while you're engrossed in what you're doing. So theoretically, it's not your fault because you're not thinking of this sort of stuff. You're getting sucked out of a good position just to complete the task that you need to complete. Now, the hard thing about a laptop is that the screen and the keyboard are so close together, and that sort of makes it a little bit difficult to maintain a really nice neck and upper back posture. In an ideal world, that screen should be directly at eye level, and it's much the same as when you're driving a car, where if you're sitting in a car behind the wheel and you can adjust your rear vision mirror to fit this particular position, then you know that any time you get dragged out of that shape, whether you're fatiguing or you're getting a bit tired, if you can no longer see out the back of the car in the same way, that will cue you to be up a little bit taller, to readjust your posture so that you can go back to seeing things the way they should be. So the screen should be exactly the same in a perfect world because it encourages you to be in the same shape that we were in when you were standing. So the trick with a laptop is that unless you can put your laptop up onto a stand, and have an additional keyboard down here to separate the two, the only way that we can really make this more advantageous for you is if you prioritize your good posture to begin with, and then drop your screen back as far as possible, and then instead of getting everything to hinge down, by still looking forwards, you can then start to look down more so with your eyes and maybe a tiny little bit with your neck, but even better, if you can take a little bit of a step back and from your hips, hinge your hips forward a little bit more if you have that range of motion, so that your head and neck and back are in the same position, but now you're actually optimizing the shape of your neck and upper back. So one of the things we want to make sure that we're doing here is that we are keeping everything in a really nice shape, in a really nice posture for as long as humanly possible. Now, the last thing that I think is really important to talk about when we're discussing good posture in any environment is that you can give yourself a big tick if you sit down in a good posture to begin with and everything's optimized. But the trouble that a lot of people get into is that as soon as you get engrossed in what you're doing for any period of time, unless you're ideally supported in a great shape, it can be very easy to then get sucked out into a good position or find yourself gravitating towards other postures that you wouldn't normally get into. But because you tick that box to begin with that you're in a good posture, even though you were then dragged out of a good posture for potentially the majority of that activity, it doesn't tend to register the same way because you give yourself that tick that you're in a good posture to begin with, not that you successfully continually stayed in that good posture throughout the entirety of that activity. So that's basically some of the really simple ways that you can put into place to optimize your sitting posture and adapt that to any seat that you sit in or any activity that you do that requires sitting. Obviously, you can do the same thing for a lot of standing shapes. There's a few little extra tweaks that we'll get to in another video for any standing-based activities. But I genuinely hope that was helpful in terms of giving you a very simple framework that you can strive towards every single day to make sure that what you're doing is as optimal as possible. But again, with that being said, I hope that was genuinely helpful. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.